Welcome back to the discussion, Military Health and the Move from Legacy Systems, sponsored by Leidos on Federal News Radio 1500 AM and federalnewsradio.com. My guest today is Doug Barton, Senior Vice President, Chief Technology Officer, and Chief Engineer, Leidos Health. I'm your moderator, John Gilroy. Well, you pick up the newspaper, you talk to everyone, everyone's worried about information assurance and cybersecurity. So how do information assurance requirements differ between commercial electronic health records and the DoD?
As I briefly alluded to earlier, in addition to providing clinical care, the health systems within the military health system have a requirement to support what they call medical readiness, which is military readiness. So there's a whole separate process to make sure that when you want to deploy your unit, that unit is medically ready to deploy. And you would be surprised at how often service members cannot deploy because they have dental issues that have not yet been resolved or medical issues that have not been resolved. Therefore, when you take a body of information about active duty military personnel, you not only can ascertain their health status, which is protected health information, which is federally protected generally by HIPAA, you can also ascertain something about the readiness of the unit to deploy, which is clearly germane. It's a national security interest. So there's a higher standard of care in terms of information assurance. It's appropriately provided to medical systems within the Department of Defense. And that imposes on commercial products that aren't accustomed to working to this level of security, additional requirements that have to be worked through. And so we got a 2-year run at it, fortunately, working with the department, both DHA, which is the Defense Health Agency, and the DoD CIO's office, to see to it that we could construct an information assurance program that was appropriate to the data that was being protected, and also appropriate to the higher level of sensitivity to that information. But even with that additional requirement, if you take a step back and look at the requirements for protected health information, first and foremost, there are HIPAA regulations, both the privacy and security regulations, which are adhered to by commercial entities generally. When you move into the federal space and start to look at additional regulations, for instance, there's something called controlled unclassified information. Well, PHI is a category of controlled unclassified information that has additional regulatory requirements placed upon it. And if you look at DHS requirements for critical infrastructure, healthcare systems and the software and systems that support their function are defined as critical infrastructure, which puts yet another collection, of federal requirements and demands on that data. So the mere fact that it's both CUI, as they say, and critical infrastructure, in addition to the fact that it has military national security relevance, increases the requirement for strong cybersecurity protections. Those were planned for and accommodated in the go-live process. So we're currently have authority to operate, but we have to maintain that status over time.
And there's another layer on top of all this complexity is system availability. So how is system availability and continuity of operations assured in these newer systems?
Well, the good part about that is that if you look at a commercial healthcare system, they have a very similar availability requirement that you would see in the DoD. As a matter of fact, they have words for it like clinical availability. It's almost a utility level standard of service with very, very high availability requirements. So these products inherently are engineered as single instances to be very, very internally redundant and to have high availability characteristics. In addition, of course, we have a continuity of operation and disaster recovery site that can take the full burden of the primary site should the primary site become unavailable. And those are kept in real-time synchronization. So we had an advantage in this instance working with commercial product that they effectively had the same availability requirements that the DoD had. Made it easier.
Look at your calendar here. It's been, I think, almost a year now since the first IOC went, and there's 2 or 3 other ones besides that.
That's right.
So let's look forward in a couple calendar years out. So what's the future for the program?
Well, a demanding one. As we get through operational test and evaluation and get a full deployment decision, which should be expected sometime in the late spring, then they start the process of going through what they call waves, of which there's currently 24 defined, And roughly speaking, every 3 months, another 15 or so sites will be brought onto the new system. That's a very demanding process. That said, the lessons that we learn through our IOC sites inform our thinking about how to most appropriately do that. And we basically need to turn it into, you can almost think of it as a machine, right? Every quarter, you bring on another 15 sites, and you do that for the next 5.5 years until the remaining 700 plus sites are brought online. In addition, in that time period, there's going to be changes in technology. And we have contractual availability and flexibility to also insert those into the systems as we move forward. So it's not as simple as I have a system, I'm going to just roll it out 700 times. I have a system, it will continue to evolve with the technology at the same time that I'm rolling out the rest of these systems. So it'll be a challenging process, but I think what we learned in the IOC deployments inform our thinking. And
this kind of the concept of continuous improvement is exactly what you elucidated upon there, wasn't it? I mean, this is what we're talking about because things are changing and technology is getting better and faster.
And a primary benefit of having a commercial system or commercial components built into the system is they're constantly having to improve to meet the demands of the market. The DoD doesn't have to invest in that. They've already effectively purchased that technological advancement. All they need to do is schedule the insertion of that technology into the system as we move forward.
Looks like geographically it was focused on the Pacific Northwest. It's going to move across the United States, I hope, huh?
It will move down the coast. San Francisco will be the next area that will go online. Then effectively it moves across the coast. About 80% of the sites are CONUS, continental United States. There's also a Pacific and a European footprint that would be the last two areas to do. So yeah, it's a big system.
Yeah, great. Well, it's a fascinating discussion, but unfortunately, Doug, we're running out of time here. I'd like to thank today's guest, Doug Barton, Senior Vice President, Chief Technology Officer, and Chief Engineer, Leidos Health. I'm John Gilroy on Federal News Radio 1500 AM. For more on this discussion, visit federalnewsradio.com and search Legacy Systems.